Everyone, thank you for joining us today. My name is Santana Shipley, and I'm the Community Operations Manager with the IAGA.
Hey everyone, Preston McClellan, CEO of Golf Space Collective.
Hi everyone, Renee Biller, Communications and Marketing Manager at Indiana Golf.
We are here with Renee today to highlight Indiana's role using AI. Just Renee, with your day-to-day uses, streamlining tournament coverage, just maintaining a consistent voice and brand, and just general overall workflow for the organization. Just kind of want to highlight some practical ways that Indiana and Renee is incorporating AI that we think other AGAs can learn from. And we're excited to dive into that today. So, to start, Renee, how has AI become a part of your day-to-day work and marketing communications with Indiana Golf?
Yeah, so AI is a little daunting sometimes. So I think that that's something that a lot of people need to understand and feel valid in knowing that it is a little bit daunting to get into. So I try to use AI in a minimal way, but ways that have a huge mental or like physical time drain on my work life balance, right? So, in a day to day, I use ChatGPT. That's the typical AI model that I'm using because a lot of my job is text based, and that model really does a great job at working through uh, articles and captions and things that really you can train to sound like a brand voice. So, having worked with ChatGPT for over 2 years now, it has become an integral part of my day to day workflow. I use it for helping with caption creation because there's only so many ways that you can give one message from your own brain without it sounding completely redundant and using the same words. So I like to use it to help give me a fresh idea. A lot of times I don't use the entire uh, you know, thing that it gives out to me. I will take the ideas that it uses and then say, oh, my version sounded a little bit better here, but I liked this line. So I really liked the line that it gave me. And I will then incorporate that into the caption. Also, day to day, there's a lot of articles that we are writing for Indiana Golf, and I like to plug in as much information as I possibly can, but writing that information out in our voice, in our brand voice, and then asking ChatGPT to kind of replicate, take that information, and help me spit out almost a final product. So I give it as much as I possibly can, and then it will take it. So, for example, the Hall of Fame is something that the Indiana Golf Foundation has every single year. And one of the requirements is to have a biography of whoever's being inducted. And to take someone's full resume of 50, 60 years in the industry and to boil that down into one biography is a difficult task for someone who's not writing biographies very frequently. So I will take that resume, I will give some background information, some communication that had gone on between whoever was communicating with them about being inducted and their service to the game and that sort of thing. And then I will have ChatGPT replicate one of the bios that we previously used. So I'll say this was 2023's bio, here was 2024's bio. We liked this format. Can you take this new fresh information on this player and make a bio for it? Then you have to go in and double check that the information that they gave is correct. You have to go in and double check that the years that ChatGPT put in were accurate from what the resume said. So there is some double checking that you have to do using that using AI, but it really can streamline because writing a bio from a huge stack of papers and a bunch of files on your computer could take a really long time, but instead, it's an hour's worth of work rather than, six or a full day's worth of work. So whatever you think might be a huge mental or physical time out of your day, that's really where I like to start with using AI.
Absolutely. And I just want to dive in just a little bit more, just because Indiana is special in having so many different organizations. and I know you talked about this at the Midwest Regional with Preston. Are there certain ways that you are training your AI to kind of come up with all this different stuff based on, the branding for all different organizations under the Indiana Golf umbrella?
Yes. So typically the voice, it doesn't change so much between our associations. We like it to sound professional and relatable, have the focus be on the story, on the person. We like to tell that story. So when working with the AI, I'll take a lot of articles that I've written 100% by myself, or that I really liked one that I collaborated with ChatGPT. See, I use collaborating because it's not just ChatGPT using or doing all the work for me. So I will take some of those articles and I'll put it into a new thread, and you can train within these threads of ChatGPT. So I have one that's called caption creation, and within that, it's all my social media captions, and I'll say I really like this. Make this caption sound a little bit more like this previous caption. I really like the way that we did this for the Indiana Golf magazine. Can we replicate that for this month's magazine? And you can continue to train that voice. I have one for articles. So whether it's a tournament article or an Indiana Golf magazine article in our physical publication. I like the voice to sound very similar. So I'll take those articles, I'll plug them in and say, this was a 2024 article that we wrote for the summer magazine. I really like the voice. Can you analyze that voice for me? And ChatGPT will write out a full analysis of what the voice sounds like, as if I were to hand it to someone else and they were to spend hours analyzing what the voice is, finding keywords, writing that up, because that's what consultants can do. If you hire a consulting brand to come in to your organization, they will analyze all of that stuff and give you this information. So ChatGPT can take all of that, analyze it for you in a matter of seconds. And then you can say, I'd like my brand to sound a little bit more like this, or I'd like my brand to have a clearer professional focus. I'd really like the highlight to be the story that we're telling on the people, because we put, people and those stories first here at Indiana Golf. That's a very big part of our brand voice. But we like to sound relatable. We don't like to come across as, anyone who knows more than someone else. So we like to be relatable and sound like it's a friend delivering the message. And so all of that stuff, I will talk to ChatGPT and we'll just kind of have a conversation. And I joke that AI will like me because I start every conversation with, hi, ChatGPT, can you please help me with? And I'm very kind to the AI, which is something that I just joke about whenever I have an AI conversation, is that if they ever take over, they're going to say, Renee was nice to me that whole time. But I like to train the model and make sure that it's going through and kind of producing what sounds like the Indiana Golf voice over and over and over again. And that is done within each individual thread that I have. I'm not opening up a new chat line each and every time. I'm repeating going into that tab and having it use that within. And those models, they remember everything, which is a really key thing to remember when you're using AI, is that it remembers and it stores that memory for quite some time. And if you upgrade to like the premium, it stores it for an even longer period of time. So you can go back and say, hey, do you remember when we wrote that bio on this person 2 years ago? And they'll say, here's the bio, and give you a pretty good rundown of what you did a long time ago back in the thread instead of scrolling. So it is really, really smart when it comes to memory and how you can change the voice and train that voice.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the training is obviously a key part of the use of ChatGPT because it is obvious when people are using AI to write with no instructions. I think I tell people all the time, if I ever see an M dash, which is the long dash in an email, I pretty much immediately know that was written by ChatGPT. So that's like one of my first instructions is to not use M dashes unless it literally like actually makes sense to use them. So I think highlighting the fact that you got to train it, upload documents that you've written yourself, have real conversations with it. will obviously make it a lot better over time. And so kind of ties into like the next topic that we wanted to have was kind of talking through the same setup of how you do that on a tournament day, how you exclusively use ChatGPT, or not exclusively, but how you use ChatGPT when you're on site at an event, when you have a lot of things going on, how does it kind of fit into each step of that process?
Yeah, absolutely. Incredible question. Because I think this is something that a lot of people could save a lot of time doing. Is that I have ChatGPT downloaded on my phone. And so my phone is like the only thing that's with me for the most part of tournament days. There will be a time where I sit down at my computer, but that's either at the very end of the day or on a lunch break or something like that, or when there's a lot of downtime, which doesn't always happen during tournaments. So the phone goes with me. I'm updating social media and all that stuff. So when I get on site at an event, let's take the Southern Open last year as an example. It's the first tournament of the year and the one where you're kind of jumping back into the whole workflow of everything. So I show up on site at Bloomington Country Club and I go around and I take a couple establishing photos for social media. And there's a couple of sponsors that we wanted to thank. And so I get some of those photos, I get a couple player photos, and I load that up into Instagram. And then I immediately open up ChatGPT and I talk into it because that saves me time. And so I use the voice function and I say, "Hi, ChatGPT. I'm at Bloomington Country Club today on, April 15th, and I am experiencing a really cold morning. It's windy, it's breezy, and I know that it's going to warm up today, but this morning it's cold. Our sponsors are include sponsor name 1 and 2, and we're excited to kick off the first PGA event of the year." And then ChatGPT will give me a really good first version of a caption. And I might say, I really want it to sound like this. So I'll just type that in and I'll type that into the Instagram caption, but I might copy and paste, the second half of that caption that it gave to me. And then I make my first post of the day. Great. Then I'm going around and I'm taking photos, getting some pictures of players, some pictures of the golf course, signage, all of that fun stuff. I'll update our stories because that's really where I put, our link to the leaderboard and everything. People love to follow our leaderboards. So I'll make maybe 3 or 4 of those story posts. And that's the fun part for me. I love going around just with my camera, taking pictures, updating social media in that way. And I probably won't touch AI or anything until the very end of the day, which is we have our winner, right? So I use a different app called Otter, Otter AI. If there's a desktop version of it as well. And if you record directly into Otter, it's like totally free and you get unlimited minutes of recording. So I use the Otter app and it transcribes as you're talking, the same way ChatGPT does, but I like to have them in a separate area. So I use this other AI to generate every transcript of my interviews. So Vince Drummond was our winner of the PGA Southern Open last year. So I take out the microphone and I hook it up to my phone and I start the Otter recording. So it records the voice and it transcribes it, which is wonderful for me. So I then start asking him questions. I say, what was your game like today? How did you battle the windy conditions? Were you checking the leaderboard? Did you know that you were not in first place all day long? Did you know that you had a really great comeback on birdie, birdie, birdie on holes 15, 16, 17? And that's really what won the tournament for you. And I record all of his answers. Then once I'm done with that interview and I take his photo, I go back into ChatGPT and I'll start talking and I'll say, "ChatGPT, it was a great day at Bloomington Country Club. We had 145 players in the field today in 2 different waves. We had a morning and an afternoon wave. And Vince Drummond was in the morning wave and he had to wait all day long to watch the second wave go through to see if he was going to win. So he had to practice his chipping, practice his putting, go get lunch, and come back and make sure that he was there at the end to watch as Eric Steger really came close on that leaderboard, and he overtook him on the back nine until Steger had bogey, bogey, bogey on holes 13, 14, 15, and he never recovered from it, leaving Drummond with a two-stroke lead at the very end of the day. But there were some really amazing shots, like a hole-in-one or like a eagle on the hardest hole of the day. And I'll include that information. And our tournament software, Blue Golf, gives us that sort of rundown information. So I'll say all those things into ChatGPT. And then I'll say, but don't write my article yet, because here's my final transcript of the interview with Vince Drummond. And I'd like for you to include 2 to 3 of his quotes about the day. And then it'll say, okay, thanks. I'm waiting for your transcript interview. And then I'll go into Otter, I'll copy and paste that, and I'll put it into ChatGPT and say, here is the transcript with Vince Drummond. And then it'll say, here's your article on the 2025 PGA Southern Open. And then it'll give me all that stuff. And then I check it. Drummond is a hard last name to spell just from talking. It is spelled Drummond incorrectly. So anytime it says Drummond, I have to go in and correct that. So now is the first time all day that I've pulled out my computer and I copy and paste what ChatGPT gave to me and I put it into a Word document. And now I have corrected Drummond's name. I've made sure that everything on the scores were correct, that it spelled everything correct. Some really funny, weird grammar that and punctuation, I fix that. And then I say, great, here's a polished article, and I worked on this for 15 minutes. Now I can go home and drive an hour and a half home. And that just saves me so much time from sitting there and writing everything out and looking through the transcript or listening to the transcript and then having to include those quotes there, something that would take multiple hours. If you're having to listen to that transcript and then hand type everything and figure out what key quotes were there, both of those AI tools just really take down so much of the time. But that's really what a typical tournament day looks like for me.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think just to add on to that, Renee, with you being, a one-man communications and marketing team with Indiana Golf, it almost just feels like you have a whole team behind you. I'm sure on tournament days it doesn't always feel like that. But I think just kind of diving into the next question, and you had mentioned this in the intro, for someone hearing AI usage and thinking in broad terms, what does this look like outside of tournament days and a little bit deeper than just social captions? What does your typical week look like using AI and kind of other aspects?
Yeah, so a lot of it is writing articles. And I think I've covered a really good way that I've used it for articles. But when I run into like a mental block situation, I use it for brainstorming, trying to come up with new creative ways that we can do marketing. I ran into a really difficult situation a few weeks ago where I was sent an HTML code for an advertisement that we were sending out, and one of the colors was incorrect when I was sending the test, but it was correct on my end in our CRM. I am no web-based coder. That is not in my job description. I can maybe edit text within an HTML when I can command F and find it within the HTML. But I'm saying my knowledge of that is so limited. And so I took the entire code, I wrote out the problem that I was having, and I said, can you please rewrite this code? And it flushed out the entire HTML code for me to replug into our CRM, and it fixed the problem of why we were having a color issue on one line of text. So like things like that where I have absolutely no idea. ChatGPT is going to actually be my first line of defense on trying to figure out something. If I can't, then we have other people in our network that we can go to. But for the most part, it can help problem solve in some really crazy ways. It's a great way to have a brainstorming session. I was trying to come up with a better acronym for, a women's golf meeting and how we can play on some golf words and include ladies and women in there and what words can we use. And that just takes a lot of mental energy to try to come up with an acronym and put in for a networking group. ChatGPT came up with 30 answers in 15 seconds. And that's just something that brain power can't always accomplish in a quick amount of time. And it's just really, really helpful. And then you work with it and you talk to it and you say, I really don't like this acronym that you gave me, but I like the way that this one includes a golf word. And then it'll get, great, let me give you 5 more. And you just keep working with it.
Yeah, I think that's like honestly the brainstorm buddy is a great term. That's how I use it a lot. And anyone working in marketing or creative or really anything where there's not an exact science of what we're doing and you're kind of constantly having to ideate and brainstorm, it's great to be able to do that because you can also tell it, the personas you want it to use. You can have it be more, you can have it question yourself. You can tell like there's so many different ways to leverage that. So it's awesome to hear that you guys are doing that too. So Renee, as a one-person marketing communications role, how do you find the AI has helped you improve your efficiency? And is there like one single thing you could point to that's helped you the most in that capacity?
Great question. Being a one-person show, one-man band, can be a little bit difficult sometimes, especially with the workload that we have with being multiple associations. So my tournament schedule is over 35 tournaments, and that might be one AGA's entire year, and that's just my tournament schedule. I'm not able to make it to every single event. So really, I feel the biggest gains during the in season is with tournaments and writing the articles and getting the information because I can ask an intern, I can ask a tournament director to get a couple of pieces of information and I can make an article and I can make a social media post off of very, very little with ChatGPT and how it can just kind of replicate what has been done in the past with tournament information and plugging in birdies and pars and that sort of stuff. I can make a lot out of a little, and that's at least in season is one of the biggest things that AI really helps with. It saves time when I am at an event as well, and allows me to get home to my family a lot
Mhm.
quicker. If I have to sit at the end of an event when the tournament staff, the interns, everyone is left, but Renee is sitting there still writing her article and updating social media. If I have to be there for 2 hours after an event just to get all the things done before I have an hour and a half drive home, that's just not ideal, and feels like I have to keep going once the event is over. So it really helps save that mental energy and physical energy a lot of times when I'm at an event and everyone else has gone home because the job doesn't always stop once the event has finished. And once that last putt has been made, that's really when my job starts. It feels like sometimes. So it's able to help me feel like there's someone in my back corner. There's a really great way that I can continue working in a streamlined workflow and have a lot of support, really, during times where you're in the middle of a 5, 6 day tournament stretch, and this is your fifth, sixth time doing the same thing over and over again, and your brain's not working, and you're exhausted, and you've had the biggest events of the year, and you want this stuff to still come out really, really great. And it will when you've used the model and you've continued to put that information in and train it and work with it. That you don't have to think, my brain's not working the best right now, and I don't have the capacity to do this. It's rinse and repeat essentially. And if you have those steps down, once you get into it, it really makes you feel like, okay, I can take a minute, get a drink of water, and now I can take 25 to 30 minutes and have everything up on socials in a really, really quick amount of time. The only thing that AI really won't do is edit my photos for me at the end of the day, a big tournament album. So it really just helps with getting through some of those really long, hard, 15, 16-hour days.
Okay, so there's a lot of conversation around AI right now, of course, and sometimes some hesitation around it. How do you think, and I know you had mentioned in collaboration and using it with you and it's not working for you. How do you think about AI as a tool that supports your work rather than replaces it?
I think that it's one of the biggest time savers that I could ever ask for. I wouldn't say that it replaces me. I wouldn't say that it replaces another person because multiple people in our office are using AI. Our executive director uses AI, and there's no one that can replace our executive director. And that is true, across PGA and AGA associations. They know Mike is longest in the game, one of the best in the game and in the business. And there's not a lot of things that could replace our executive director, but I think it's something that adds to our tool belt and that allows us to do better work than what we can always do with a really big workload. All of us have a really big workload. You wouldn't blame a tree service for using a chainsaw instead of using a manual saw. You'd say it makes sense that you're using something that makes your work go a lot faster and a lot easier and allows you to do that for a longer amount of time to get the work done and to help the people that need the help. And that's what we do. We're a nonprofit. We want to help people. We want to show the game. We want to tell the stories. We want to do the most that we can in the business in this state because we are the golf hub of the state of Indiana. And in order to do that, we have to think of new and creative ways to get the job done. And AI really, really helps us to get the job done in those new and creative ways. I don't ever think it could replace any member of our staff. I don't even think it could replace an additional member of staff if we were to bring someone on. I think it's just a tool that allows us to do better work and to do that work a little bit easier, whether it's merging spreadsheets, which not all of us are great at. The accounting department might be really great at it, but the marketing department, not so much. Don't work in Excel too much. So when there's an Excel spreadsheet that I need help with, or I need a step-by-step instruction on how to do something in Excel, instead of Googling that, AI can say, hey, you need to organize your spreadsheet in this way. Here's a step-by-step instruction on it. And you'll find that quicker using ChatGPT than finding some help page on some Microsoft page where someone has made the right comment on some blog. When you have to do a deep dive for some of those troubleshooting things, it can be really, really frustrating and take a lot of time where you can just ask that question into ChatGPT and it'll give you that. So I think that while there is hesitation, there should be some excitement to explore and to say, what can it do for me to help me? Because it's not replacing me. It's not changing the work that I'm putting out. It's only really enhancing it and making me a better marketer because I can have someone to bounce ideas off of. I can have someone to refresh my ideas. If I had a team member, right, I'm a one-man band over here. If I had a team member, we might be able to collaborate a little bit more. But being one person in the role, I need someone there 24/7 because 8 p.m. not everyone's going to be there. Someone's driving home, have left the tournament already, and I'm still there working. So it's just a 24/7 support role, really.
Yeah, and you can train it like it really is like your own personal assistant or your own whatever you want it to do. And I think earlier in that answer you mentioned how it's really not replacing anyone. It's kind of augmenting things, especially in our world here in the golf world. What we do is far too niche and there's too much nuance to it to where it's not like AI is going to come in and replace people in the AGA or really in the golf industry in the near future. Like you may see with headlines of other companies that happening, it's truly going to just make your job easier and then make the company be able to, make the organization better as well. So it's great to hear you kind of allude to that as well. Kind of to wrap things up, I guess, is we wanted to ask, like, if you were going to give advice to another AGA who was not currently really doing much of anything at AI with AI, like, where would you recommend diving in? Like, what's a realistic first or second step that they can start to take to kind of get on the path that you guys have started on with at Indiana Golf?
Yeah, great question. I think to start small, I would say to assess a few tasks that take a really big physical amount of time for you to complete, and to then work within that and see how can AI maybe help me in this task. Maybe it's you need to do like a rebrand. And if a rebrand is not something that you've ever done, you can ask AI, what are a few of those steps to even start? What's in a rebrand kit? What might I need to include in a branding kit? Instead of having to look all those answers up individually. I would try to think what might make you more efficient. And a lot of times I think that's in the smaller things like writing captions, the things that are taking so much of your mental time day to day that are really small tasks that just really can be streamlined and to put in a lot of your mental energy. One thing that I will say is just a caveat is I will never use AI to write an email. That is something that is in the business that around these conversations on AI. I will never ever use AI to write an email. You will always have 100% personal communication from Renee, because if you're talking to me here, you get what you're going to get in an email. And I never use it to replace empathy. I never use it to replace a hard conversation. All of that always will come from me. And a lot of conversations around AI can say, hey, I'm using it to write my emails. Hey, customer service, there was a really difficult thing and I asked AI how to deal with the situation. I personally believe that those are sometimes some ways that I wouldn't want to outsource AI, because those are things that we have to use as a human connection, right? I think human connection is incredibly important, but where we can use it is where anyone might be able to see a big change, whether it's captions, whether it's articles, whether it's transcribing things, whether it's looking for help in HTML, whether it's looking for brand advice, whether it's trying to find and replicate colors, whether it's a step-by-step guide. There's so many ways that you can use it, that your AGA or any other AGA or PGA section, I mean, it doesn't matter who is trying to implement it, because the PGA of America is really pushing AI right now, where AGAs are kind of, I'm not sure if I should really be using this. So it's interesting to see as Indiana golfer, we have messaging from both of those sides, how AGAs are a little bit hesitant right now, but the PGA is like, use it. Here's an AI model that we have integrated into your Google system. And you'll see if you use Gmail that there's a Gemini inclusion in your emails. In HubSpot, which is a big conversation with AGAs, there's an inclusion for AI. And I do use that instead of plugging it back into ChatGPT. A lot of times I just say, rewrite or help me expand it or whatever within HubSpot. And that's a great tool. But I think really starting small and seeing where you might be Googling a lot of things, to just start plugging that into ChatGPT. And then the more you're in it and you can see what it can do, you'll be inspired to see what else you can plug in there. We've done some logo designs through AI this year. And then it doesn't do the full product. We still have to send it off to a designer or design it within our Adobe here, and make sure that we get the right files and everything. But it does a really great first step. And there's just so much that AI can do and generate for you that it's incredible. And just getting in there and getting started, I think, is even the first step to do it. Make an account, use the free version. I didn't have the paid version until last month. So everything that I did in 2025, which was so much of my job, was all on the free version. And I just said, hey, we're starting to use more documents. We're starting to use more spreadsheets. I think there's a little bit more of a capacity that we can use as an organization. And that's why we got the paid version this year. But 2025, it was all individual personal accounts that had, everyone was using their own and would just go on that capacity. So it's totally free to sign up. I think it's a great tool. and you should just dive in and get started.
Yeah, I think it's a huge difference too in using, which, like you said, it's everyone's capable of using the free version and diving in that way. There's a huge difference in the amount of uploads and everything that you can use with the paid version. So I'm sure that's kind of helped out even more. And just closing out, Renee, I want to give a huge thank you to you and Indiana Golf for allowing the IAGA to highlight the creative and very thoughtful ways that you are using AI to help your association. And just hopefully other AGAs can kind of take a lot of this work that you're doing and replicate it in their own association.
I hope so too. I think it's a great way to start streamlining some things, take some really big, daunting tasks, and make them a little bit more manageable and bite-sized. And you always have to do the final edit. You always have to do the final work with what AI gives you. But it does a great job getting you started or getting you pushed in the right direction. And there's a lot of work that you put into doing it, but I think it really pays off in the end.
As a reminder, if your association would like to highlight a program or initiative, please reach out to me, Santana Shipley at shipley@iaga.org.